Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we find ourselves under the golden domes and incense-thick corridors of a Byzantine hospital, where saints hang from the walls. Incense stings your eyes, and the treatment plan includes both leeches and your spiritual condition. You lie on a thin pallet, wrapped in itchy linens that smell faintly of last week's patient. Somewhere, someone is chanting. Somewhere else, something is being bled. You might hear the gentle clink of bronze tools in a smoky corner, or feel a cool hand on your forehead, though you're not sure if it belongs to a doctor, a monk, or a particularly helpful ghost. This wasn't medicine as you know it, and you might not survive this one. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from, what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. The Byzantine Empire is often remembered for its dazzling mosaics, its theological debates that could split a city in two, and its emperors who wore crowns heavy enough to cause long-term neck trauma. But behind those gilded icons and imperial processions lurked a quieter, stranger, and often less celebrated marvel: the Byzantine hospital. Picture this. You're ill in Constantinople. It's not a minor cough, but something soul-shaking. You walk, or are carried past painted saints and into a building that smells like candle wax, basil, and despair. You are not greeted with a clipboard or insurance form. You are greeted with a prayer. Because in Byzantium, healing wasn't just about poultices and pulse rates. It was about penance, prayer, and a bit of very dubious pharmacology. Doctors existed, yes. Some were trained, some just had impressive beards, but they worked alongside monks, relics, and the occasional divine intervention. There are herbs, there are cauterizations, there are bronze tools shaped like things you defined in your neighbor's mysterious kitchen drawer, and hovering over it all, an atmosphere of sanctified discomfort. The hospital is a place of mercy. But mercy, like most things in Byzantium, tends to smell faintly of mildew and myrrh. In this journey, you'll meet the patients who didn't sign up for this. You'll watch St. Samson soothe the city's fevered poor. You'll peek into a dusty chest full of ancient surgical tools that look more like lost jewelry than medical gear. And finally, you'll wander through a villa where the sick are far away, and the air smells of roses, not antiseptic. This isn't a story of modern hospitals. There are no white coats, no beeping machines, and no vending machines with sad sandwiches. It's a story of hope, pain, and healing. Byzantine style. Now, let's begin where it hurts. You arrive late in the day, but it doesn't matter. Time doesn't mean much here. The sun flickers through thin, colored glass windows in watery patches, and you're not sure if it's morning, afternoon, or the middle of your third fever dream. The hospital isn't a clean-cut grid of rooms and charts. It's a cloistered, cowing space where every corridor hums with whispered prayers and the low groans of people discovering that Byzantine medicine is, in fact, not gentle.
Your bed.
And that a charitable word is a wooden plank with some padding that was once straw, now mostly regret. The linens are vaguely damp, not in a comforting, cool way, but in a has anyone washed this since the last emperor died sort of way. Yet the smell is a complex arrangement of body odor, old incense, musty plaster, and a lingering hint of boiled leeks. You are not alone. On either side of you lie strangers. One coughing, like he's trying to eject a demon through his ribs. The other muttering Latin, Greek, and possibly goat noises in his sleep. You're sick, you think. Maybe you were just too tired and this is where you ended up. Either way, you're now a guest of the Xenon, the Byzantine hospital, which is part clinic, part monastery, and part spiritual labyrinth designed to test your patience far more than it heals your lungs. You were expecting a place to recover. You get a place to be humbled. A deacon passes by, eyes red from smoke and sleeplessness, holding a thurible that puffs out holy smoke like it's trying to exorcise the concept of illness itself. The smell is sharp and sweet. Frankincense, myrrh, and possibly expired time. Someone has clearly decided that prayer works best when it smothers you slowly. You cough, and a nun gently pats your shoulder, then hands you a syrup so bitter it makes your teeth try to crawl away. It's made from wormwood, vinegar, and what might be ground snail shell. You ask what it is? She says a tonic for balance. You want to ask balance of what, but your tongue is busy trying to reject itself from your body. You are hoping for something warm and healing. You get alchemy and guesses. There are no curtains, no partitions. Everyone sees everything. A man with a leg wound is being treated across the room. The doctor, if that's what he is, uses a hot iron rod that sizzles like a kitchen accident. The smell of seared flesh blends with the incense in a duet that makes you rethink ever eating again. You look away, too late. The image is seared into your mind, which feels unfair, because your own diagnosis remains a mystery. You wanted privacy? You get an audience. You're told to rest, but the corridor never sleeps. A bell rings every few hours. Someone is always arriving or moaning, or arguing in theological tones about whether saints prefer basil or mint in their poultices. At one point, you think you hear a monk weeping softly over a bowl of boiled herbs. No one explains why. The walls are painted with scenes of Christ healing the sick, noble, glowing images of serenity and miracles. The people in the paintings look serene. People in the room look like bread left out in a thunderstorm. You expect art to inspire comfort. It mostly inspires questions about irony. Your fever breaks for a moment. You sit up, bad idea. The room spins like a Byzantine mosaic caught in a flood. A kindly man hands you water. It's tepid, tastes faintly of metal, and you're warned not to drink too quickly. You might confuse your humors. You hadn't realized you had humors, let alone that they were easily startled. You expected hydration. You get medieval waterboarding with a philosophy degree. At night, though night is really just a dimmer version of the day, someone sings psalms. It's lovely. Also slightly terrifying. The tune is beautiful, floating through the chamber like the last breath of a particularly melodramatic ghost. You close your eyes, but rest doesn't come. Too many sounds, too many smells, too much wondering whether this whole operation is meant to heal the body or just wear it down until the soul gives up and floats upward. Sleep, it seems, is a suggestion, not a service. Eventually, you drift into something like a nap. You dream of being chased by a choir of nuns with ladles, each offering you another dose of that terrible snail root tonic. You wake up with a damp forehead and a vague memory of someone drawing a cross on your chest while muttering about St. Artemios. You expected clarity. You get symbolic forehead graffiti. Rooster crows outside, which seems impossible, considering you're in the city. But in Byzantium, nothing is impossible if it confuses you enough. The nurse returns. You are offered a new treatment. A poultice wrapped in cabbage leaves, bound to your side with linen and theological optimism. It is said to draw out impurities. It mostly draws in ants. You expected progress. You get produce. The corridor continues its routine. A new patient arrives, screaming. An old one departs, quietly. A priest blesses the doorframe. Cat sneaks through the back, steals part of someone's bread, and leaves unchallenged. You lie there, sandwiched between the miserable and the mysterious, and realize something profound. There is no science here. Only ritual, repetition, and very sincere herbal guesses. And so the corridor where no one sleeps remains just that. You lie still, body aching, mind worry. There is no mattress. There is no soap. There is no peace. Only prayer, cabbage. You wake to the sound of someone arguing with a saint. Not metaphorically. They're standing in front of a painted icon. Hands raised. It's asking why their cousin Rash has moved from his leg to his face, and whether this means he's cursed or just unlucky. No one seems particularly concerned. This is just how medicine works here. Part logic, part incense, and a heavy helping of divine negotiation. You're still groggy, wrapped in sweat-damp linens that now smell faintly of old cabbage and burning basil. A nun passes by holding a relic, a bone fragment, allegedly from someone holy, which she waves in small practice circles near your head. You're not sure whether to feel blessed or disinfected. The air is thick with incense again. Either the room is being spiritually cleansed, or someone spilled the thurible and doubled the dose. Breathing feels like inhaling through a scented pillow that also happens to be on fire. You expected fresh air. You get theological smog. Healer approaches. He looks serious, but so does everyone here, including the cats. He carries a wooden box filled with herbs, vials, and something that rattles like disappointment. His beard is long, his robe is stained, and his eyes are full of that particular kind of tired found only in people who've seen too many infections and not enough answers. He asks how you feel. You start to answer, but he interrupts. He already knows, or rather, the saints do. He holds up a pendulum, lets it swing over your chest, and nods solemnly. Diagnosis. Imbalance of bile. Which one? Doesn't matter, all of them. You try to ask what that means? He explains it by listing 3 Greek words in 4 colors. One of them is black, one is green, and the rest are feelings, possibly yours. You wanted answers? You get philosophy with a fever? Your treatment plan begins. First, fasting. Because clearly, your humors have been spoiled by food. You haven't eaten since yesterday's broth that tasted like sadness soaked in rosemary. But sure, let's call this a cleanse. Next, you're given a bitter tea made of wormwood, rue, and something described only as holy dust. It tastes like boiled bitterness, with a side of regret. You drink because the nun is watching. You expected nourishment, to get flavored repentance. Then, out come the leeches. Of course there are leeches. They're kept in a small clay pot that smells like bog water and ambition. The healer murmurs something about purification as he places one gently near your elbow. It attaches immediately. You look away. It's easier that way. At least it's not biting your face. You overheard someone say that next level care is probably for nobility. You expected advanced medicine, get a medieval juice cleanse via swamp creature. After the leeching, you're instructed to lie still.
Is hard.
Not because of pain, but because the bed is now damp from something that might be blood, sweat, or blessed olive oil. Your neighbor coughs a hymn in his sleep. The nun returns and sprinkles crushed mint across your blanket. To keep the evil humors away, you sneeze. She nods approvingly. You expected relief. You get a scented curse deterrent. Later, someone brings you a charm. It's a tiny lead tablet inscribed with prayers. You're retold to wear it around your neck and not to take it off. Even during sleep, even during bathing, even if it starts to itch. You ask what it does. The answer helps remind the body not to give up. This seems overly optimistic for a piece of soft metal that smells like church and rainwater. But again, the nun is watching. You expected antibiotics? You get jewelry with low self-esteem? Across the room, someone lights another censer. More smoke. More muttering. At this point, you're pretty sure the air has become semi-solid and now counts as part of your diet. You begin to wonder if breathing counts as medication here. So, you're overdosing. You expected ventilation. You get devotional fog. A monk comes in next. He checks your pulse. Not by feeling your wrist, but by holding your hand, closing his eyes, and saying the Lord's Prayer under his breath. He listens to your heartbeat like it's an unreliable witness. He nods, smiles faintly, and whispers, "It is in God's hands." You want to ask if God also has training in chest infections, but your lungs are currently occupied. You expected observation. You get divine outsourcing. Then comes the burning. A small stick dipped in herbs and resin is ignited and waved over your blanket. This, they say, drives out bad spirits. It also drives out most of the oxygen. Your eyes water and you try not to cough too hard, because that might signal demonic presence. Apparently hacking up phlegm is a spiritual statement here. You expected care? You get smoke signals? Hours pass. Maybe it's days. The light never changes much, and the sound of chanting makes time soft and looped. Your treatment continues. More herbs, more fasting, more sacred aromatics. Your stomach growls so loudly that a passing nun blesses it, just in case. You expected lunch? You get an exorcism for your digestive tract? Eventually, a different healer visits, presses lightly on your belly, asks if you've had visions. You say no. He looks disappointed. Visions, it seems, would have made diagnosis easier. Without them, he turns to a book. It's large, handwritten, and filled with diagrams of people with birds, stars, and Latin phrases on their organs. He squints, flips a few pages, and prescribes another tea. This one with elderflower and ash. Tastes slightly better than the last. Slightly. You expected certainty. Get herbal roulette. And yet you don't feel worse. Not better, but not worse. So maybe it's the rest. Maybe it's the fact that everyone around you seems so utterly convinced you will improve, that you must improve. After all, healing isn't just for your body. It's proof that God is still watching. Your recovery is a moral performance, so you sip your ash tea. You let the leeches do their work. You breathe the basil-scented fog. You wear the charm and try not to sneeze on it. Because here in this strange, smoky sanctuary, your treatment is working, or failing, or simply continuing. And no one, not even the saints, seems entirely sure which. The evening brings no quiet, only a gentler sort of chaos. The oil lamps are dimmed, casting long, flickering shadows that make the wall frescoes seem to breathe. A saint stares down at you from the corner, eyes gentle. Hand raised in eternal benediction, but the effect is less comforting than intended. You feel judged, deeply, silently judged. Not for your sins necessarily, but for existing in this building with questionable linens and too many rodents. You pull the thin blanket up over your shoulders. It doesn't help. It's scratchy, smells like wet paper and time, and has holes large enough to qualify as windows. Still, it's yours. Or at least no one else has claimed it today. You expected sleep. You get something closer to theatrical purgatory. The room quiets in the way a city street might. Never truly silent, just briefly less offensive. Someone groans softly 2 beds over. Monk coughs once, long and dramatic, like he's trying to send a message to heaven via phlegm. The air is thick, warmer now, and not in a pleasant, tucked-in kind of way. It's the warmth of too many bodies exhaling anxiety into a shared atmosphere with no circulation, and even less personal space. A movement near your head, small skittering, definitely alive. You freeze. There's a rustle under the cot. A tail, maybe. You tell yourself it's a holy mouse. A blessed visitor, perhaps bearing crumbs from the dinner you didn't get. A soft reminder from the saints that even small creatures need healing. You expected spiritual company. You get a rat with boundary issues. You curl tighter. The straw-stuffed mattress crackles beneath you. Or maybe that S, something chewing the straw from the inside. Your neighbor mutters something about St. Basil, then farts loudly, and with the kind of confidence only the deeply sick or the deeply resigned possess. No one reacts. It's just another note in the hospital's nightly symphony. You expected dignity. You get background wind from the next bed over. Sleep comes in short, confused intervals. You dream of flying icons and soup with too many eyes in it. You wake with a start. Someone is whispering again. It's not directed at you. It's a chant, soft and repetitive, like a lullaby written by someone who disliked children but loved incense. A nun walks by, nods at you, and leaves a small clay bowl beside your bed. Inside, a garlic clove, a scrap of parchment with a prayer, and half a fig. You are not sure if you're meant to eat it, burn it, or wear it as a hat. You expected medicine. You get interpretive performance art in a bowl. The rat returns, this time with friends. You stare at them, and for a moment, they stare back. 3 sets of glossy black eyes, unbothered and deeply judging your attempt at survival. You swat at them with your blanket, which tears further in protest. One of the rats retreats under the bed and begins what sounds like a very determined meal. You think it's the fig? You hope it's the fig. You expected healing rituals. You get rodent buffet. By midnight, or something like it, the corridor grows colder. The oil lamp near your head sputters once, then goes out with a sigh, like it too has given up on this place. Now the only light comes from the altar at the far end, where a single candle burns in front of an icon of the Theotokos. Her painted eyes shimmer gold in the flicker, watching over a room of sleepers, groaners, whisperers, and the occasional sleeper-turned-groaner. You expected divine protection. You get surveillance with glitter paint. You close your eyes just for a moment, long enough for your body to remember what comfort used to feel like. The straw jabs into your ribs like a judgmental uncle. The air is damp. Something brushes your foot. You don't look. Looking is how people learn things they can't unlearn. You try to drift again, but there is always a sound. A prayer, a scratch, a sniffle that turns into a sob, a faint clang from the tools cabinet. Someone's bed creaks like it's reliving old trauma. Every noise is small but meaningful, like the hospital itself is trying to narrate your decline with a subtle percussion section. You expected silence. You get an ensemble of exhaustion. Then comes the midnight round. A monk with a bell. It's a nun with a pot of something hot and indistinct. The bell rings once. The nun ladles something into the mouths of the most alert patients. A bitter root broth with what appears to be floating bark. She reaches your bed, squints, and gently nudges you awake with her sandal. You expected nurturing. You'd get surprise soup and foot-based encouragement. You sip. It tastes like pine needles and leftover repentance. She smiles. It's the first real smile you've seen all day. For a moment, it's enough. The warmth is bitter, but comforting. Like a hug from someone you guarantee trust, but need anyway. You lie back down. The rats seem to have declared a ceasefire. The saint on the wall now looks less judgmental, more resigned. You and he are in the same situation, stuck watching suffering unfold and unable to intervene in any practical way. You drift, finally, not into restful sleep, but into the kind of half-dream where your body is too tired to move. But your brain keeps listing things you've forgotten to do. Breathe. Swat rats. Thank saints. Not in that order. And as you lie there, body sore, soul tangled, stomach empty, you realize that this is healing, or what passes for it here. You're not better, but you're still here. And in a Byzantine hospital, that's more than most can say. Morning arrives without warning. It's not with sunlight, not with birdsong, but with the distinct sound of someone vomiting into a bucket 2 beds away. You open your eyes. Regret follows. The air is heavier now. A warm stew of human suffering, overused incense, and whatever was in that midnight bark soup. A nun is already at your side, holding something that could be bread or a particularly dry sponge. She tells you it's time for your nourishment. You expected breakfast. You get theological chewing practice. Bread is dense, not just chewy, hostile. It's the kind of food that feels like it has a grudge. You gnaw on it while pretending your jaw isn't cracking under the pressure. It tastes faintly of ash, more faintly of salt, and mostly of the oven's regrets. Beside it sits a bowl of warm liquid. Not quite soup, not quite water. It smells of sage, lemon, and passive disappointment. You're told it's holy water with herbs. You'll sip. It burns a little. Holiness, apparently, is mildly acidic. You expected flavor. You get moral hydration. Monk walks by and blesses you mid-chew. You nod politely, mouthful of regret bread. He doesn't stop. He's on a mission to bless every cot in the corridor, which he does with a brisk efficiency that suggests he's trying to win a timed event. The blessing smells like beeswax and dry leaves. Your mouth still tastes like sadness held together with starch. Then comes the floor. You're expected to stand. Not for exercise, not for recovery, but for humility. You are to kneel, then bow toward the icon at the far end of the corridor. Your legs naturally protest. You haven't moved in hours. Your back sounds like someone stepping on a bag of old walnuts, but you try. You swing your feet off the cot. The floor greets them like a disappointed ice bath. You expected support. You get betrayal in stone form. The tiles are cold. Colder than expected. Colder than logic. It feels like they were forged by a vengeful glacier. You gasp. The nun nods in approval. A proper patient, she says, must feel the world as it truly is. Apparently the world is bone-chilling and unsympathetic. You kneel, slowly, carefully. One knee at a time, like someone diffusing a trap. The stone sends small messages of complaint up your shins. You bow your head toward the painted Madonna. She looks back, serene and golden, entirely immune to the spinal feedback you're currently receiving. Your knees begin to buzz. You say a prayer, unsure whether it's devotional or just a cry for warmth. You expected spiritual comfort. You get patellar frostbite. Eventually, you're helped back into bed. The nurse brings a fresh wrap for your chest. Something herbal again. This time wrapped in cloth that smells like basil, old socks, and hope. Your stomach, however, has its own agenda. It growls loudly, repeatedly, a clear declaration of dissatisfaction. The nun looks scandalized. You're offered a second piece of the hard bread, as if punishment will satisfy your hunger. You take it. Your stomach disagrees. You expected fuel. You get an edible insult. Try to rest again. But your body, now upright and cold, decides to become aware of every ache it's been ignoring. Your shoulder throbs from the straw. Your ribs complain. Your feet feel like they're still being punished for sins they haven't committed. The healer returns. He inspects your tongue, nods thoughtfully, declares you cooling. You aren't sure if that is a medical verdict or just an acknowledgement that you nearly froze kneeling earlier. You expected answers. You get seasonal commentary. He prescribes fennel seeds and another walk around the corridor for circulation, he says. You want to ask if dignity will be part of the treatment soon, but your mouth is busy trying to figure out how to chew fennel seeds without dislocating anything. They're small, crunchy, and taste like licorice that forgot how to be fun. You expected recovery. You get a breath mint with a superiority complex. As you shuffle down the hall, feet wrapped in thin cloth, you notice a statue in the corner you hadn't before. Saint Samson, healer of the poor. He's smiling slightly, holding a building in his palm. A tiny hospital, perhaps, or a very ambitious bread oven, the plaque beneath says. He served the sick with no thought for himself, which makes you feel bad because your main thought right now is, I hope this walk leads to better soup. You expected inspiration. You get guilt in stone form. The corridor is long, uneven, and cluttered with the detritus of spiritual medicine. Bowls, herbs, folded linens. One corner has a full jar of leeches left ominously unlabeled. A cat watches you pass. It blinks slowly, as if judging your posture. You ignore it. Posture is a luxury. You return to your cot victorious in the sense that you didn't collapse. Your reward: a poultice of boiled onions for your feet. Warm, slippery, and entirely confusing. You ask what it treats, the nun replies, circulation and pride. You expected logic. You give vegetable penance. The smell of onions begins to rise. Someone sneezes. The rats are nowhere to be seen. Perhaps even they have limits. Your stomach grumbles again, and you sigh. The nun appears, with a soft smile and one final offering. A dried fig, slightly shriveled, slightly sticky, and exactly what your body has been whispering for. You eat it slowly, reverently. The fig, unlike everything else, asks nothing of you. It just is. And for one short moment, that's enough. The healer returns, carries a scroll. A short one, which is either a good sign or a very ambiguous one. He nods, adjusts his robes, and informs you that your treatment is now complete. The word floats strangely in the air, like incense without a candle. You're not entirely well. At best, upright. Still coughing, still aching, still unsure whether yesterday's fig was real or a small edible hallucination. But you are complete. That's the official stance. You expected recovery, you get politely concluded. The scroll contains your discharge instructions. It's not a list of medicines or follow-up appointments. Instead, it offers a series of prayers, a dietary warning about lentils, and a strongly worded paragraph advising you to limit extreme emotions. Apparently, sorrow confuses your internal balance. Joy, if excessive, also causes problems. Laughter is healing, but only in moderation, like wine or personal opinions. You nod solemnly, while quietly craving both another fig and the right to feel things without footnotes. You expected clarity. You get emotional caution written in scriptural italics. You're handed your belongings. They've been kept in a basket, or at least near a basket, that hosted several rats and one enthusiastic beetle. Your sandals have absorbed more hallway than they were built for. Your robe now smells like incense, vinegar, and spiritual secondhand smoke. A small slip of parchment is tucked into your belt. It bears the face of a saint and a faded line that reads, "Go and heal others, or at least try not to come back." You expected encouragement. You get polite redirection with sacred branding. You're led to the exit. Your legs don't quite remember the steps. One knee folds like an overcooked lentil. Your back creaks with every movement, as though it's gently applauding your escape. The nun beside you offers no arm, only a reminder. Walk humbly, for the Lord has returned your humility. That's one interpretation of a limp. You expected strength. You get theological wobbles. Before leaving, there's one last stop. The icon wall. Dozens of saints, dozens of candles. You're instructed to light one. It's not for yourself. That would be indulgent, but for your healer, or the hospital, or the general concept of gratitude. Strike the taper, touch flame to wick, and watch the candles sputter. It's twice, then die. The nun doesn't flinch, she hands you another. You expected symbolism. You get whacked with confidence issues. The second candle stays lit. Barely you whisper a prayer, or something shaped like one. Half hope, half question, half quiet complaint. You are three halves of a person now, the saints above watch, serene and unbothered. You wonder if they're impressed, or simply used to scenes like this. The final blessing comes next. A monk approaches and taps your forehead with a small sprig of rosemary. He mumbles something, possibly a prayer, possibly instructions, possibly a recipe. The rosemary leaves a wet spot on your tunic. It smells pleasant. That's something. You expected closure. You get an herbed forehead and damp symbolism. You step outside. The air hits differently, sharp, real, and almost too honest. No incense, no garlic, no quiet coughs, just the wind, a bit of dust, and the realization that the world has kept moving while you were horizontal. You expected welcome. You get rapid re-entry into regular confusion. A boy bumps into you. He mumbles an apology and keeps running. Your knee twinges in response. You take 3 careful steps and realize you've forgotten how walking used to work. Your hip clicks. Your arm swings too far. You're now what the healer called, ready to rejoin life. Which mostly means no longer actively horizontal. You expected recovery. You get functional awkwardness with bonus clicking. Down the road, a bread vendor appears. Your stomach remembers its job and makes a suggestion. You limp over, ask the price. It's too high. You sigh, explain you've just been discharged from a sacred hospital. The vendor nods. Asks if you brought a saint's token. You show your scroll. He shrugs. Everyone's got one of those. And he figs. You expected respect. You get bakery negotiations and disbelief. You sit on a stone bench. Tighten your sandals. One is barely hanging on. A nun passes by. She gives you a look. Pity. Or possibly recognition. Maybe she's just trying to recall where she's seen that limp before. You nod. She nods. You both understand. Because in Byzantium, leaving a hospital doesn't mean you're healed. It just means you've been edited. Hobble forward, past courtyards full of gossip, and markets full of loud fruit. Your body hums with ache. Your mind is full of questions, and your soul is lightly seasoned with rosemary. But you are walking. And in this empire of saints, oil, and architectural humility, that's a pretty good ending. Before he was a saint, before he was a healer, before anyone handed him holy rosemary or asked him to exorcise a persistent cough, Samson was just a boy with a quiet stare and hands that always smelled faintly of crushed herbs and candle wax. Born into wealth, which in Byzantine terms meant he had access to furniture. Bread that didn't fight back, in a room with at least one window. He could have stayed there, dined comfortably, married strategically, developed a passion for calligraphy and citrus. But Samson, as it turned out, had a terrible affliction. Compassion, chronic, untreatable. You, however, are watching from a distance, from the future, from the crowd, from behind the heavy curtain of historical hindsight. You see the boy walking the streets of Constantinople barefoot. It's not because he's poor, but because he keeps giving away his sandals. He treats boils on beggars' arms with ointments made in his kitchen. He listens, truly listens, to people who haven't been listened to in decades. And he doesn't flinch at the smell, the sores, the moaning. It's already in training, though he doesn't know it yet. You expected ambition. You get a medical prodigy with a robe and no shoes. He had money and he gave it away, not dramatically. There were no trumpet blasts or banners reading. Benevolent youth destroys family wealth. Simply noticed that the people outside his villa were dying, and he didn't think how sad. He thought, I have ointment. Then he thought, I have more rooms than I use. Then he just did something about it. People talk, as they always do. Some whispered that he was mad. Others said he was saintly. Still others thought he just had strange hobbies and a weak stomach for injustice. But whatever the case, word spread. There was a young man, barely out of childhood, would see the sick, feed the hungry, and offer a clean place to sleep. Free of charge. Free of judgment. And, most miraculously of all, free of sermons. You expected charity with conditions. You get healing without paperwork. Then came the plague. Not the big one. One of the many smaller, more intimate plagues that like to visit Constantinople every few years. Like a cousin with poor timing. Fevers ran high, bellies swelled, skin blistered, doctors ran out of ideas, hospitals ran out of cots, monks ran out of incense. The rich closed their doors. Samson opened his. He turned his house into a hospice. Not a poetic one, not metaphorical. A real building with real people, moaning, coughing, healing slowly, or dying gently. And he walked its halls barefoot still, sleeves rolled up, sleeves always rolled up, because there was always something to carry, someone to soothe, or a floor to mop. You expected noble detachment. You get mop duty with grace. The emperor heard. Of course he did. And emperors get ill. Everyone hears. And this one, Justinian no less, had fallen into some mysterious affliction that defied the best minds. The most expensive doctors, and all available saints in residence. Desperate, someone suggested a different kind of healer. A barefoot one. A man with no titles, no throne access, and the inconvenient habit of speaking gently to the dying. Samson was summoned. He came. He did not bow low. He did not quote scripture. He placed his hands on the emperor's burning forehead and murmured something no one else quite heard. A prayer, maybe, or a joke. Or just the word breathe. The fever broke. You expected holy spectacle. You get a miracle whispered through a smirk. The emperor recovered. He was grateful, which for emperors is usually dangerous. He offered Samson gold, land, titles, and the ever-popular opportunity to be surrounded by powerful people who smile too hard. Samson declined. Politely, of course, because healing doesn't make you rude. He asked for just one thing. A hospital. Not for the emperor. For the poor. For everyone else. You expected personal gain. You get institutional kindness. And so it was granted. A Xenon. A hospital of charity. Built with imperial funds. Guided by the barefoot hands of its first and only spiritual architect. Samson didn't just run it. He became part of it. Its walls carried his quiet voice. Its herbs remembered his fingertips, its patients, the beggars, the blind, the outcast. Spoke of a man who didn't heal with power, but with presence. He died, of course. Everyone does. But not before becoming something far more durable than a man. He became a pattern, a prototype. The image stamped into every act of mercy that followed, not with force, not with thunder, but with gentleness, the most Byzantine form of rebellion. And that, somehow, is how you end up centuries later, lying in a corridor that smells like mildew. In hope beneath an icon of a man with soft eyes and suspiciously clean feet, wondering if his spirit still lingers in the corners? You expected history. Get a roommate in sainthood, because even now, with your bruises, your limp, your onion-wrapped feet, there is something in the hospital that feels less like bureaucracy and more like memory. A sense that someone once cared so much it changed the shape of care itself. That healing, done quietly and without reward, can echo longer than an empire. And so, you leave the story of Samson with one thought: he was just a boy. And somehow, that was enough. You arrive at the hospital again, not as a patient this time, not entirely. Your limp has settled into something resembling a lifestyle, and your breath wheezes like a bellows with trust issues. But you can walk, sort of. You return for something. Stranger than treatment. Comfort. The corridor looks the same. Same dim oil lamps, same solemn saints, same cat glaring from a windowsill like it's memorized your weaknesses. But this time, you notice something new. The relics. They're everywhere. Tucked into alcoves. Hidden behind worn curtains, resting on chipped pedestals beneath scratched golden frames. Tiny splinters of bones, wrapped in silk and guarded by glass. Shards of pottery, fingers of saints, even the alleged heel skin of someone who once cured fevers by proximity. The labels are written in Old Greek, New Greek, in a language only monks can read without blinking. You expected sterile rooms. You get a cabinet of blessed body parts. A. Nun gestures reverently toward a box the size of a small loaf. Inside, a tooth. Whose tooth? Unclear. Possibly Saint Euphemia, possibly a local dentist. No one dares to ask too many questions. To doubt a relic is to tempt not only heaven, but the very fragile peacekeeping politics of holy dust you expected. Evidence. You get faith wrapped in silk. Pilgrims have come. You're one of them, technically. Though you didn't bring an offering, unless you count your persistent cough and a general look of regret. Others come with candles, scarves, small wooden carvings. One woman kneels beside a glass vial said to hold tears from a monk who once sneezed during prayer and was instantly forgiven. Another man bows in front of a thread from the original robe of Saint Samson. You're not entirely sure that's true. The robe looks suspiciously like a curtain. But again, if you don't ask, you expected reverence. You get souvenir theology. Each relic has a story. Not all of them are consistent. One bone is either a finger from St. Polycarp or a toe from an elderly midwife who died heroically during a flood. A candle stub allegedly burned beside a saint's deathbed, though it looks more like something someone found under a pew and decided it was meaningful. The important thing isn't proof. The important thing is presence. These relics mean someone. Was here once someone holy, or close enough to holiness that their belongings acquired a slight glow of endurance? You walk the hall slowly. Every step makes something creak. Your sandals, your knees, your faith. A small boy sits beside one of the more popular reliquaries, eyes closed, whispering. You can't hear what he says, but you can guess. Help my father walk. Help my mother wake. Help me be like him, the man with the soft eyes and suspiciously clean feet. You expected silence? You get whispers full of asking. Then, of course, there are the pretenders. Not the people, the relics. Not all of them are real. That's the quiet truth, whispered only in kitchens and dusty scriptoriums. Some are duplicates, some are inspired. One reliquary is said to contain the handkerchief of St. Anna, but the stitching reads property of the monastery laundry room. Another displays a vial labeled miracle oil, but it smells remarkably like the stuff used in the nearby kitchen to fry onions. You expect a divine mystery. You get slightly reheated deception, but no one minds. Because healing, like hope, doesn't require accuracy. It requires belief, repetition, and maybe a little incense for flavor. You don't have to know where the relic came from. You just need to sit near it and want something. Healing, sleep, forgiveness, a better kind of bread. You find an empty stool beside a chipped icon of Saint Samson. Someone's left a plum there. As an offering? As a snack? As bait for passing squirrels? Unclear. You sit. Your joints crack. Your eyes close. You feel watched. Not in a threatening way. In the way dry leaves seem to listen when you speak, you expected distance. You get history breathing on your shoulder. Someone joins you. A woman with a shawl that smells like cedar and candle smoke. She doesn't speak. She just places her hand on yours and nods toward the icon. You nod back. Words aren't needed here. The saints, real or painted, don't speak either. They just stare gently, or judgmentally. It depends on the lighting. You close your eyes again. The floor creaks. The candle sputters. Somewhere, someone knocks over a bowl of herbs and whispers a prayer to Saint Tryphon, the patron of Just Try Again. You hear soft footsteps, a snore, a rat, a soft giggle from a child who still believes the bones in the box can sing. You expected superstition. You get lullabies made of dust, and for a moment, just a long, breath-shaped moment, you don't feel sick, or tired, or doubtful. You feel like you're sitting inside a story so old it forgot where it began. A story held together by saints. Fingers, bits of cloth, fading paint, and the stubborn, unshakable belief that something sacred still lives in chipped wood and stolen figs. The relics watch you sleep, and they do not judge. You're back in bed. That's where all Byzantine stories seem to end up. Not in glory, but in linen. A bed, a blanket, the too close breathing of your neighbor, and the gentle creak of something that doesn't want to admit it's a hospital, but very much is. This time, you're not unwell. Not particularly. Just tired in that deep, uncertain way that settles behind the knees and hums in your joints like warm vinegar. The healer stops by and nods. He doesn't say anything. Just places a coin on your bedside table. Small, worn, stamped with a long-gone emperor and the quiet scent of someone else's pocket. You expected medicine. You get Byzantine symbolic currency. It's not a payment, it's a sign. Someone, a merchant, maybe a nun, or a stranger with soft shoes, donated on your behalf. For your stay, your food, your fig, and possibly that suspicious poultice you don't want to talk about. The money has already been used, but now it must be seen. You expected thanks. You get a bronze receipt with implied meaning. This place doesn't run on coins alone. It runs on what the coin represents, the gentle economy of compassion. One person gives, another receives, and someone else gives again to keep the balance intact. St. Samson started all this, a house that heals and keeps track of kindness at the same time. There's no cash desk, that would be too obvious. The coins move quietly in corners, with nods and subtle blessings. You expected accounting. You get holy math with poetic margins. Sometimes people give olives instead, or loaves, or stories. One man once offered his walking stick. Another offered to lend his donkey to whoever needed to travel somewhere slowly and with extra wobble. It's not about worth, it's about presence. A reminder that healing always carries a cost, but that cost can be paid with a favor. Gesture, or the right words at the right time. You expected currency. You get generosity reimagined. The healer moves on. You hear him murmur something to a monk about dried herbs and how the incense shipment last week reminded him too much of livestock. You close your eyes. The coin stays on the table, but you touch. It's cold, not unkind, just certain. You leave it there. Doesn't belong to you. Across the hallway, a child is being tended to. Her mother sits beside her with a fan of palm leaves and a steady stream of whispered prayers to saints well known and others who might be imaginary but helpful. The healer brings water. A nun brings cloth. A monk brings quiet company. Number 1 brings payment, because in this hospital, help is not requested through receipts. You expected hierarchy. You get care organized by need, not title. Some people arrive with nothing, not even a name. You're given a cot, a bowl, a gentle touch of oil across the forehead, and someone to stay near when words are no longer useful. You wonder, lying there, how much that costs. You suspect it's more than most coins can hold. You expected resistance. You get steady kindness that no longer waits for applause. Later, someone arrives, dressed well, confident, full of purpose. His robe glows, his sandals are polished. He announces a donation, not softly, not humbly. He brings his own scroll, reads his own name aloud, 3 times. The nun smiles, accepts the coin, and calmly tells him the fig tree out back is looking. Especially elegant this season, you expected celebration. You'd get redirection via horticulture. Because here, donations are welcome, but not worshipped. The economy of care doesn't ask if your gift is large, only that it's given. Preferably, without ceremony, you sip water. It tastes better. Or maybe your taste has changed. The healer returns. He takes the coin, says nothing, slips it into his sleeve. He leaves something behind in its place, a plum, slightly firm, still good. You expected calculation. A piece of fruit and a closed loop. The system here is quiet and strange. It runs on trust, habit, and intention. If someone boils lentils and washes a dish, it counts. If someone sings near someone else's bed or sweeps the hallway at sunset, that action enters the same invisible balance sheet as a noble's donation, as long as it's done with sincerity. You expected fairness. You get a kind of justice, written in vegetables and quiet effort. You watch a child across the room, now sleeping peacefully. Her mother is sitting nearby, eyes closed, breathing slowly. No one hands her a bill. No one needs to. That moment, that stillness, is the currency, and maybe, just maybe, it's the most valuable thing in the room. There's something peculiar about sainthood. You'd think it ends with death, with a soft exhale, a final prayer, and a well-timed candle flickering out. But Saint Samson didn't get that kind of rest. He died, yes, but then he kept working. You learn this not from scripture, but from the hospital laundry. It's out back. Past the herb garden, past the crumbling statue of an angel with one wing and an expression of mild disapproval. The laundry courtyard is a chaotic mix of stone basins, frayed linens, buckets that leak just slightly too much, and a permanent fog of dampness that clings to the walls like gossip. And there, among the dripping sheets and steam rising from cauldrons, they tell you the story. You expected silence, yet steam and oral tradition. They say Samson never left, so that his spirit lingered, not in the altar, not in the reliquary, but in the laundry. Of all places, not to bless the work, but to continue it. Patients might leave, healers might rotate, but the laundry never stopped. Someone always needed fresh linens, which were never actually fresh, only slightly less cursed. You expected relics. You get holy mildew? One nun insists she saw him once late at night, wringing out a towel by moonlight. She swears the towel glowed. Another claims the water in the third basin turns warm without fire if a patient is dying. A boy says he felt a hand on his shoulder as he folded tunics, and when he turned, no one was there but the wrinkles were. Gone, you expected theology. You get ghost stories that iron your linens. It's easy to laugh. You do quietly. The towels always smell faintly of rosemary and myrrh, even when no one's added anything. And the sheets, well, they're never dry. Never. Not entirely. Flutter, threaten to cooperate, then fail. It's a running joke. The saints can cure blindness, but not damp corners. You expected miracles? You get eternal humidity still. The laundry is where people gather. Not just the workers. Everyone. Patients wander through, half-wrapped in gowns. Healers bring cloths to soak. Monks come to pretend they're helping. Even the cat shows up, usually to knock over a pail and stare unrepentantly into the abyss. You sit there one day, a breeze stirs the hanging sheets. A nun sings softly while scrubbing out a blanket with a stain that may have been blood or soup. No one asks. The water sloshes gently. Saramas. Since summing Risa, Sivanka of dying Risan, I'm 5 cents with Faraya, since I sin was since it smells like damp sage and something older. Something that remembers being held by someone who expected nothing in return. You expected chores. You get meditation with laundry service. Someone drops a bundle of robes beside you. You unfold them. They're heavy, worn threadbare at the cuffs. You find yourself washing without instruction. You don't know the prayers, so you hum. None doesn't correct you. The rhythm is enough. Scrub, rinse, wring. Repeat this, they say, is how Samson became a saint. Not by curing emperors, not by glowing in portraits, but by repetition, by wiping brows, by folding sheets, by doing the small things again and again until they became sacred. You expected glory. You get damp hands and the faint scent of lavender. There's a story too ridiculous to believe, but everyone believes it. That once, during a siege, the hospital ran out of clean cloth. No linen. No bandages. No towels. Samson, long dead, allegedly appeared in the courtyard, nodded to the laundry. And suddenly every basin overflowed with folded white sheets, already warm, already dry. No one saw it happen. But no one lacked a bandage that week. You expected military aid? Holy laundering. The healer comes by. He sees you with your hands in soapy water and nods. You're healing, he says. Not because your cough is gone, it isn't, Not because your limp is better. It isn't. But because you've joined the rhythm. The hospital breathes, and you are part of its lungs now. You smile. The cat knocks over another pail. Later, that evening, someone brings in a pile of new laundry. You help. No one tells you to. It's not about order. It's about habit. Fold, stack, hang. A sheet brushes your face. You swear, just for a moment, it smells like figs. You expected fatigue. You get strange peace. And as the sun dips behind the domes of Constantinople, casting gold over the wet cobblestones and tired windows, you realize something about Samson's afterlife. He isn't resting, making what he always did, making. Sure, someone has something dry to cover them, and in a place where saints sleep in paintings and the linen never does. That counts for more than you'd think. You don't pack much. There's nothing to pack. You arrived with a cough and a limp, and those are still with you, though now they seem more like companions than symptoms. The nun offers you a bundle, a modest roll of cloth, one heel of bread, and a fig wrapped in a square of old linen. You nod your thanks. You want to say something profound? Instead, you sneeze. You expected a farewell speech. You get sinus betrayal. The air outside the hospital feels too loud, too sharp. It doesn't hum with psalms or coughs or the soft murmurs of someone asking St. Samson to intervene in a digestive issue. Smells of roasted garlic and shoe leather and unblessed commerce. A merchant nearly walks into you. A chicken definitely does. You are once again part of the city. But something's changed. You expected escape. You get transition. Your foot drags a little less now. Not because it's healed, it hasn't, but because you've accepted its opinion about stairs. Robe still smells faintly of boiled linen and distant basil. And tucked inside the fold, pressed against your side like a secret, is a sliver of laundry string. One you didn't mean to steal. You'll tell yourself later that St. Samson meant for you to take it. You expected souvenirs. You get guilt-framed symbolism. The road leads nowhere in particular. Constantinople unfolds like a labyrinth made of marble, bad decisions, and loud fig vendors. You walk slowly. Everyone else moves faster. That's fine. You're not racing. You're just following the city's exhale. The ghost walks with you, not a literal one, not entirely, but you feel him, not behind you, not above you, just beside. Quiet, like laundry steam. Gentle, like the pressure of a hand that reminds you you're still here. It's not comforting. It's not terrifying. It's persistent. You expected silence. You get invisible company. You pass a man shouting about fish. A boy sweeping dust into different configurations of failure. A woman adjusting her sandal like it insulted her. None of them look at you, but somehow you feel seen. By whom exactly is unclear. You tighten your grip on the cloth bundle. It's warm. It's not from sunlight, from memory. You expected hunger. You get fig-scented nostalgia. At the city's edge, where domes become hills and streets unravel into dirt, you stop. There's a man by the gate. His leg is bent at the wrong angle. Skin is pale, sweaty. He's muttering, not in words. Sounds. You crouch beside him. You don't have herbs. You don't have incense. You have a bit of bread, a fig, and one hand that smells slightly of laundry water and grace. You place the bread into his hand. He doesn't respond. You stay anyway. You expect it to be done. You get invited into someone else's beginning. It's not a miracle. He doesn't sit up. No divine light cracks the sky. No saint appears in a puff of myrrh. But his hand tightens around the crust. His eyes flicker. His breathing shifts slightly. Barely. But enough to know the hospital hasn't left you, it's followed. It's through you. You expected distance. You get inheritance. You. Sit with him until the city begins to fade into dusk. Gold giving way to indigo. Prayers giving way to meal smells. A cart rattles by. A woman calls out a name you don't recognize. A cat stares at you like it knows everything and won't tell. You rise slowly. Your knees protest. Your hip echoes a soft objection. You walk on anyway. You don't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the linen string in your pocket says you don't need to. The hospital isn't a building. It's a rhythm, habit. A sequence of small kindnesses repeated until they leave a mark. even if they never leave a scar. You expect a discharge. You get discharged. By the time you reach the next bend in the road, the stars are out. They do not speak, but they shimmer. With the same quiet insistence as a damp towel hung carefully beside a dying man's cot. You walk slowly, carefully, softly, and somewhere. Beneath the layers of fatigue and memory, you realize something strange. You are still healing. You are still healing. You are still healing. And somehow, that's enough. The box is small, insultingly small, given the amount of suffering it once contained. What sits on a velvet cloth in the corner of a museum case, surrounded by gold coins and a placard written in 3 languages, none of which bothered to translate. The phrase, "This will hurt," it's bronze. The lid opens with a gentle squeak, like it's sighing with relief that no one will use it today. Inside, a neatly arranged collection of surgical tools gleam faintly under the oil lamp lighting hooks. Forceps, scissors, probes, each one lovingly crafted, beautifully decorated, and deeply offended by the concept of anesthesia you expected. Something blunt and brutal. You get dainty horrors, sharpened like secrets. Each instrument is elegant, curved like calligraphy, etched with delicate patterns. One even has a tiny floral motif along the handle, as if the last thing you want to see before someone opens your belly is a cheerful vine. If you squint, it all looks like a jewelry set for a noblewoman with unusually specific hobbies. It's the kind of person who wears a torque and performs amputations recreationally. You expected healing tools. You get accessories from a socially complex nightmare. A little placard tells you this is the surgical kit of Thessaloniki, 5th century. Recovered from a physician's tomb. Cause of death? Not listed. Possibly karma? A curved blade catches the light. It's labeled as a tonsil knife. You lean closer. It looks more like something a polite demon might carry in a velvet pouch. Next to it, a hook designed to extract foreign objects from wounds or souls from the body, depending on the angle. And your general trust in ancient medicine? You expected scalpels. You get metaphysical threats. There's a set of bronze tweezers, long and delicate, meant for removing small growths, possibly insects, definitely dignity. A thin file, purpose uncertain, is described as possibly dental. You hope it isn't, because the idea of someone filing your teeth while reading prayers aloud over your spasming limbs is an image you now have to carry forever. You're welcome. The air smells like bronze, dust, and badly suppressed memories. You can almost hear it, the clatter of tools on stone, the breathless murmurs of prayer, and the patient begging softly in the background. Not for survival. Just for it to be over quickly. You expected museum silence. You get the echo of unresolved trauma. Also inside the box, a handful of tiny lead charms. Flat discs, each inscribed with words like "Lord, protect this vessel," or "May the wound weep no more." One says "Be gone, humors of heat." Another just says "Mercy" in shaky script, which does not inspire confidence. You expected sterilization. You get medieval vibes and coin-shaped coping mechanisms. Historians believe the charms were placed on or near the patient to invoke divine assistance. Some were tied to limbs before surgery. Others were kept in the physician's sleeve, possibly for luck, or possibly to jingle threateningly as they approached. One theory suggests that the charms were meant to be chewed during the procedure, not for healing, but because chewing lead is slightly less painful than screaming in public. You expected prayer? Get lead-based anxiety management, your eyes? Land on a long, delicate probe. It looks like something used to stir expensive wine. Its actual purpose, it's pus drainage. You let that sit for a moment. Pus drainage. In a world with no rubber gloves, no antibiotics, and no formal apology system. Beside it, forceps with jaws like a beetle's nightmare. They were for childbirth, allegedly, the placard helpfully. Explains that the outcome was not always favorable. Well, footnotes. Well, explanation. Just those 7 words, which say more than an entire textbook ever could. You expected obstetrics. You get chaos with a handle. You imagine yourself lying on a stone bench in a monastic xenon. Your arm tied down with reused linen, a priest murmuring something about the Holy Spirit while someone gently unfolds this glittering toolkit beside you. You try to ask what they're doing, they smile. They don't answer, because in the Byzantine Empire, if you're asking questions, you're not yet sedated enough. A small sponge, hardened with time, rests at the bottom of the kit, possibly used to mop blood, possibly just there for decoration. Their way, it's had a rough few centuries. You briefly wonder if it ever wanted this life, if the sponge dreamed of washing grapes, only to be drafted into battlefield triage. You expected objectivity. You get existential crises via linen. There's a final drawer beneath the main tray. The curator, a man who smells like old books and things that aren't quite dead, opens it slowly. Inside, a surgical saw. Short, elegant, finely toothed. The kind of object you'd mistake for a dessert knife if your dinner party had gone. Very, very wrong. The handle is worn smooth. Someone held this often, not to threaten but to relieve suffering, which in most cases meant remove the offending limb and hope the patient doesn't notice the infection setting in. If you expected precision, you get wishful carpentry. Curator closes the box. You stare at it. It stares back. The case is clean. The tools are organized. But everything about them hums with an energy you don't like. Not haunted, just tired. Like these instruments have seen too many emergencies, been blamed for too many deaths, never once been thanked for surviving a week without rust. You take one step back. You expected knowledge. You get guilt in bronze form, and in your mind. Now cursed with vivid imagination, you picture it. The same tools, in a back room of a Byzantine hospital. Resting on a damp cloth beside a cup of wine, a fading candle, and a patient trying very hard not to make eye contact with the man who just picked up the forceps with the little floral design. You expected the past. You get the reminder that pain, dressed up nicely, is still pain. The patient is already lying there when you arrive. Pale, sweating, eyes glazed. Like cheap pottery that didn't quite fire properly. He doesn't speak. That's understandable. There's a small bowl of something steaming on a stool beside. Him a mix of herbs, oil, and inevitability. The linen around his leg is soaked through with something unpleasantly brown. You expected to observe? You are now holding the thread. The surgeon is a monk. Or a barber. Or possibly just someone who found the surgical kit first and refused to let go. He gestures for silence, though no one was talking. You stare at the needle. It's long curved. Bronze. Not the shiny bronze of triumph, but the dull, tarnished bronze of objects with too much history and not enough rinsing. You expected thread. You get a weaponized hairpin with ambition. He doesn't wear gloves, those haven't been invented yet. Instead, he dips his hands in vinegar and crosses himself. That apparently will keep the humors aligned and the demons confused. Needle is threaded with a coarse fiber that might be linen, might be sinew, and definitely doesn't want to be involved. The wound is angry. Not metaphorically, it looks like it holds a personal grudge against the leg it's attached to. Swollen. Discolored, vaguely resentful. The patient groans as the monk leans in. You take a step back, then realize you've just been handed the bowl of herbs. You expected to assist, yet promoted to unwilling witness. The first stitch goes in. The patient howls like a wounded goat in a thunderstorm. The monk hums a psalm. Under his breath, possibly for comfort, possibly as a distraction, you notice his needle technique is less graceful seamstress and more determined stabber. The thread pulls through with a wet sound that your brain will replay later at dinner, uninvited. You expected finesse. You get medieval upholstery. You dab the wound with the herb mixture. It smells of basil, ash, and something vaguely minty that might also be mouse droppings. The monk nods approvingly as if to say, yes, excellent dabbing. Truly the Lord works through your shaking hands. You expected competence. You get divine outsourcing stitch too. The needle bends slightly as though it too is trying to resign. The monk adjusts, wipes his forehead with the same cloth he used on the wound, a detail you try not to dwell on. The patient has bitten clean through the corner of the kotza's linen cover. He will never be reimbursed. The monk pauses to rethread. He does it by mouth. You expected hygiene? Get pre-germ oral embroidery? A nun appears at the doorway and watches. silently for a moment, and then she walks over and hands you a charm. A tiny lead disc with a crude cross and the words, "Not today, Lord." You don't know if it's for the patient or for you. You put it in your sleeve anyway. It clinks softly. It sounds like doubt. The third stitch rips a little. Flesh isn't made for this, you think. Not to be poked and tugged and sealed shut, with threads that probably used to be part of a fishing net. The patient has gone very still. That could mean he's at peace, or that his spirit is hiding under the cot. You expected medicine, you get theater, but the tragic kind. Finally, the monk ties the knot. Not a sailor's knot, not a surgeon's knot, just a knot. It sits like a confused snail at the edge of the wound. He pats the patient's leg with the same hand he used for everything. Elson murmurs something that sounds like a cross between Amen and Please Don't Rot. You expected resolution. You get a desperate truce between flesh and thread. He gestures for you to hand him the wrap. You do, slightly damp. You try not to think about why. He wraps the leg tightly, in the way one wraps fish for market. Quickly, and with mild regret. Then he stands, cracks his neck, and leaves without a word. The needle still in his hand, like a badge of exhausted victory. You remain. The patient groans once, then drifts into the kind of sleep that sounds temporary. You check his pulse. It's there, faint, like a saint whispering through a cracked window. You expected calm. You get the aftermath of a sacred bar fight. Later, you clean the bowl. The herbs are mostly pulp now. The smell lingers on your fingers. You wash them in. Vinegar, just in case the monk was right about demons. The charm is still in your sleeve. You press it between your fingers. It's warm where you are. Either way, it makes a soft sound like a coin pretending to be useful. You sit down on a bench. Outside the room, the air is still. A leaf skitters across the stones like it. Two just witness something unspeakable. A cat stares at you. It knows. Of course it knows. You expected to leave. You'd sit there instead, trying to unfeel everything you just saw, and somewhere deep in the hospital, you swear you hear the sound of someone threading a needle again. There's a booklet. Technically it's a scroll, but it functions as a booklet if you're willing to squint and ignore the fact that it smells like damp straw and regret. A monk hands it to you with solemnity, as though it contains wisdom, or possibly an invoice. You expected comfort. You get paperwork soaked in suffering. The scroll is titled The Proper Exiting of Bad Humors by the Holy Flow. You take a seat on a cracked bench in the corridor and begin to read. The first line starts mid-sentence, and possibly mid-century. When the forehead is full and the eyes swim, let the brow be lanced with a silver thorn. There is no punctuation. There is also no mercy. You expected instruction. You get a cursed riddle written by someone who's bled recreationally. The second paragraph is a list of places to be opened, depending on the condition. For fevers, the temple. For melancholy, the back of the knee. For excessive dreams involving birds, the inner elbow. A small drawing shows a cheerful man having his thigh opened for misalignment of the spleen. You turn the scroll upside down. It does not help you expected anatomy. You get performance art with knives. A nun walks past and gives you a reassuring pat on the shoulder, which might just be to keep you from passing out. She sees the scroll and smiles. "Okay, beautiful guide," she says. "My cousin once read it aloud during childbirth, but you don't ask how that went." You suspect poorly. Next is a section titled On the Harmonious Pouring. It describes, in a tone far too enthusiastic, the correct rhythm for bleeding let the flow mimic a small stream, not a gutter in springtime. It recommends using a warm cloth and a prayer to St. Artemius, whose main qualification seems to be he died bravely while leaking. You expected theology. You get poetic plumbing advice further in. A paragraph marked with asterisks reads, "Should the blood cease too quickly, the patient must be startled." It suggests dropping a small object near the head or invoking the devil by name, not to summon, only to motivate. You stare at this sentence for a long time. You look around. No one else seems concerned. You expected science. You get motivational bloodletting. There's an entire chapter on leeches, lovingly illustrated. One diagram shows how to convince a leech to let go without causing offense. The suggested method involves singing, gentle rotation, and a brief apology. If that fails, vinegar. If that fails, prayer. If that fails, well, you're now the leeches. Home, you expected biology. You get hostage negotiation with an annelid. You remember now the jar you saw earlier, the one in the corner of the infirmary. Labeled simply active. You hadn't thought about it then. Now you realize it contained more personalities than leeches. One monk claimed the lead leech had a name. Basil, you expected anonymity. You get the emotional politics of bloodsucking. A footnote suggests that those of gentle constitution should be bled only in the right foot to lessen mental disturbance. You glance at your foot. It seems innocent enough. You are not so sure about your mind. Then there's the section on colors. The ideal blood, according to the scroll, is richly red, with mild darkness, like a well-behaved pomegranate. If it's too light, bad digestion; too dark, demonic stagnation; too fast, pride; too slow, sloth. You realize with creeping horror that your blood now has a personality, and it might be disappointing the saints you expected diagnosis. You get character judgment by hemoglobin. Suddenly it makes sense why monks walk so slowly. They're probably trying to avoid bleeding out due to enthusiasm. You reach the final part. Post-bleeding reflection and cleanliness. It recommends sitting under a fig tree, if available, or beside an icon. If not, you must reflect for no less than the length of a psalm. Do not eat beans. Do not look directly at the moon. Absolutely do not laugh, as it may undo the flow's memory. You expected recovery? You get spiritual cooldown and lunar restrictions? You close the scroll gently, not because it deserves gentleness, but because it's probably contagious. A nearby novice notices and claps softly. Well done, he says, as if you've passed an exam. You haven't. You're simply a person who now knows 12 ways to bleed, and 1 way to apologize to a leech. You expected progress. You get a deeper respect for clean fingernails and fully enclosed skin. Back in the infirmary, a patient across from you is being prepared for a therapeutic opening of the shoulder. The monk sharpens the tool with what sounds like a whetstone. And what feels like judgment, you offer him the scroll. He declines. I know it by heart, he says. His eyes are very calm. You step away. You are not ready to be opened for your dreams about birds. That night, you dream of the scroll. It chases you. It bleeds. It hums psalms and corrects your posture. When you wake, your hands are clenched around your blanket and your foot is suspiciously warm. You check. No blood, just a leaf. Possibly symbolic. You expected sleep. You get thematic nightmares and possible foreshadowing. You sit up. You breathe. You are still whole, for now. Scroll rests beside your cot, quietly judging you. You do not open it again. The towel is back. You remember it. You've seen it before, or one very much like it. Stiff from age, folded precisely, and resting in a wooden bowl like it's hoping for retirement. It is the color of old milk and ancient mistakes. The stain on one corner has been scrubbed out so many times, it now resembles a Byzantine mosaic of despair. You expected fresh linens. You get fabric with an emotional support group. You're not meant to touch it, but you're holding it now, because the monk who handed it to you said, "You have steady hands," and then walked away before you could object. Your hands are not steady. They're vibrating slightly with the kind of dread reserved for dental appointments and public recitations. On the cot nearby lies the patient, a man, middle-aged, glistening with sweat and maybe regret. He's breathing shallowly, staring at the ceiling like it owes him money. His ankle is the problem, swollen, discolored, and shaped like a melon that gave up. They say it was stepped on by a donkey during a disagreement. They don't elaborate. You expected something noble? You get livestock-based orthopedic trauma. The surgeon arrives. It's very calm. His robes are clean. His tools are not. He sets them on a tray like he's arranging hors d'oeuvres at a dinner party for people who hate themselves. He mutters a prayer under his breath. You catch fragments, something about accuracy, mercy, and don't let me drop the clamp again. You expected holy incantations. You get a surgeon bargaining with muscle memory. There's no preamble, no checklist, or no friendly explanation. The patient groans once, rolls his head to the side, and then bites down on a twist of cloth handed to him by someone you didn't see arrive. It smells faintly of cabbage and long decisions. The incision is quick. Too quick. It slices through the skin like it's been practicing all week. The patient makes a noise like a kettle being strangled. You hold the towel tightly, then realize. You're supposed to use it. You blot. You fail. You blot again. Stain grows. You expected to assist. You become part of the scene. The fluid, and there's always fluid, is thick, yellowish. It escapes like it was waiting. The monk nods approvingly. Humorous, he says. Leaving. You are unsure if the ankle feels the same way? You? Expected pus. You get the biography of a wound? The next tool is a probe. It disappears into the cut with a familiarity you wish it didn't have. The monk hums a tune as he works, something vaguely cheerful, possibly about St. Cosmas. You try to hum along, you stop. The patient thrashes once and then goes still. Just resting, someone says. Everyone nods. No one checks. You expected monitoring? You get denial served? Warm, the towel is no longer recognizable. It is soaked, folded wrong, and somehow heavier than when you began. You want to replace it, but there are no other towels. Just this one. The eternal towel. You press it into the wound again. It resists. The procedure ends with 3 stitches, a fig leaf salve, and a brief moment of communal silence, broken only by the unmistakable sound of a cat vomiting outside. You expected closure? You get thematic punctuation. The monk washes the tools in a bowl of wine. You do not ask whether that wine was meant for drinking. Someone hands you a second towel. You do not remember requesting it. You stare at it like it might solve everything. The old towel is taken away. You assume it will be burned. But a nun just folds it neatly and places it on a drying rack beside 6 others that look equally traumatized. You expected disposal. Get reincarnation through mildew. Later, you find yourself scrubbing the bowl. You don't remember agreeing to this either. A passing novice thanks you for your contribution to the rhythm of care. You nod politely while wondering if you'll ever be allowed to sit down again. You glance around. Patient is still breathing. Faintly, you hope. You expect hope to feel warm. It doesn't. It feels like the cold rim of a brass basin. It's the weight of wet cloth, the sharp sting of vinegar that isn't quite cleaning anything. You dry your hands on your robe. It doesn't help. The smell of the towel lingers. Blood and herbs and the very specific aroma of reluctant sanctity. You expected redemption. You get damp sleeves and moral confusion. That night, the towel haunts you. Not in dreams, that would be obvious. No, it's quieter than that. Shows up as a memory when you close your eyes. The weight, the sound, the way the fabric gave. Up halfway through the blotting, like it too had reached its theological limits, you expected ghosts. You get damp linen with emotional BACK-STOR. In the morning, you'd see it again. Not the same towel maybe, but one of its siblings. Waiting. On the cot, folded. Ready? You wonder if they ever get named? You do not ask. You are handed a wax tablet. It's warm, slightly sticky, and smells faintly of regret and bees. This, you are told, is the patient record. The writing on it looks like someone took a chicken, dipped it in ink, and gave it 5 seconds to communicate the essence of pain. You squint. You tilt it. The only legible word is moist. You expected a chart. You get a scented enigma in cursive chaos. The monk beside you nods sagely. It's improving, he says, pointing at a line that resembles a collapsed bridge. See how the pulse was described as fluent yesterday, but only puddle-like today? You do not see. You do not argue. You make a noise of mild agreement and clutch the tablet like it might melt through your fingers. You expected numbers. You get metaphors for arterial despair. Further down, a second entry notes that the patient smelled of winter, which, upon inquiry, apparently refers to a mix of pine, phlegm, and an air of melancholy. You are not sure if this is diagnosis or poetry. The line below reads, "Still breathing, dislikes barley." You nod again. You are learning. You expected symptoms. You get lifestyle preferences and meteorological metaphors. Another chart is brought out. This one is older. The wax has been scraped and rewritten so many times it looks like a battlefield of partial recoveries and half-hearted optimism. One section is labeled color of tongue, ominous. Another simply says, dreamed of goats equals watch liver. You expected consistency. You get dream analysis and accidental livestock astrology. The hospital keeps these charts in a wooden chest in the back room. Not a filing system, more of a pile with ambition. You are allowed to look through them. They do. They're labeled not by name, but by condition, smell, or memorable complaint. You find whining, groin, unjust, rash, and believed. He had two hearts. That last one has illustrations. You expected organization. You get a novella of biological anxieties. Smell, in particular, seems to be a diagnostic pillar. One monk has a nose like a bloodhound and a face like he's smelled too much for one lifetime. He walks from cat to cat, pausing, sniffing, and muttering things like left foot, sour, jest, damp, eyes, basil. You ask him what it all means. He says, interpretation is not my department. You expected logic. You get aromatherapy with passive aggression. He pauses at one patient, sniffs deeply, then crosses himself and walks away. The patient looks mildly concerned. You are told this is a good sign. Silence means time. Sound means intervention. No one wants intervention. You find a page torn from an older scroll pinned to the wall. It lists odors of illness in no particular order. Sweet like spoiled pears, sharp like goat tears, empty like clay, joyless garlic. And if it reminds you of fish but no fish is present, prepare the cloth. You expect a diagnosis. You get interpretive scent theater. In the corner, there's a shelf with jars labeled expectorants. You approach. The contents range from ground fig root and sea salt to liquefied onion. Boiled 7 times to a mysterious dark sludge labeled vocal dampener, use with regret. You do not touch it. It touches you with its smell. You expected medicine. You get potions made by spiteful apothecaries. There's one jar containing what looks like amber paste. The label says for balancing the spleen. You don't know what that means. Neither do the monks. One shrugs and says, it can't hurt unless it does. You expected confidence. You get hope in paste form. Behind the shelf sits a bound volume, bound in leather, inked in blood, or possibly very old wine. It's the Book of Sacred Impressions. It contains drawings of tongues, pages and pages of them, some forked, some coated. One disturbingly textured. Each tongue is labeled with things like spiritual heat, too much lamb, or simply Tuesday. You expected pathology. No. You get graphic novels of moist confusion. The attending healer gestures for you to follow. You do? He sits beside. A new patient opens the wax tablet and begins the interview. How did you sleep? What do you fear? Describe your dreams, but only the damp parts. You watch the patient think carefully. He answers. The wax is updated. You expected questions about pulse. You get psychiatric riddles and precipitation forecasts. You try to contribute. Point out that one patient has been sweating non-stop. For 3 days. The monk nods. Yes, he's sweating out the memory of betrayal, he says, scribbling emotional purging on the wax. You do not correct him. You expected physical causes. You get symbolic catharsis with side effects. A. Nun walks by carrying a scroll of patient updates. You ask to see it. She hands it over. Reads, Sister Pelagia, dreams returned. Less screaming. Out. Brother Methodius' heart louder today. Still doesn't trust cabbage.
Elias.
Improved urination, but confused about geography. You expected lab results. You get a medieval group chat. Eventually you return the tablet. Your fingers are sticky. Your brain is tired. You smell faintly of basil, vinegar, and whatever the table was made of. You consider asking for your own diagnosis. But you're afraid they'll say eyes like Tuesday and recommend singing into a fig. You expected help. You get prognosis. Via folklore, you step outside. The wind hits your face like a statement. You close your eyes. You take a breath. You realize you've memorized the smell of infection. You are not okay, but you are learning. You've walked for what feels like forever, through streets that smell like roasted onion. over cobblestones that seem determined to rearrange your ankles until you reach a gate. Not the kind of gate that squeaks or guards anything urgent. This one is open, quiet, mildly judgmental. 2 cypress trees stand like disapproving librarians. You step through, you expected a market. You get a villa humming with the soft sound of wealth trying not to look smug. A slave opens the outer door. He doesn't bow. He's holding a tray of figs, and his face carries the blank serenity of a man who's seen too many sandal malfunctions. He gestures for you to follow. You wipe your feet. The floor is marble, cold, smooth, and engineered specifically to make barefoot peasants rethink their life choices. You expected warmth. You get temperature control through architecture and passive aggression. The atrium is filled with plants. Not wild ones? No. These are arranged. A vine creeps up a column exactly halfway. Citrus tree leans just enough to suggest humility. Somewhere a fountain gurgles, water spilling over a carved stone in a way that implies this villa has solved thirst, boredom, and perhaps death itself. You expected silence. You get curated serenity with a soundtrack. They seat you under a cypress. You're not alone. A patrician is already there, reclining on a couch that costs more than your childhood. He's dressed in pale linen, his beard trimmed with obsessive intention. His hand rests on a bowl of chilled grapes. Yes, chilled because this man has cracked the code of stored snow. He looks at you as if considering whether your existence is theoretical. You expected a host, yet a philosophical riddle in. Expensive sandals. He gestures to the bowl. You hesitate, insists. You take a grape. It's cold, sweet, and slightly accusatory. You chew slowly, hoping it won't notice your dental situation. He watches. Not in amusement, in curiosity. Like you're a frog explaining ethics, you expected conversation. You get ethnographic analysis with grapes. He begins to speak. Slowly, precisely. The kind of slow that suggests you are not meant to interrupt. Do you know, he says, that time exists more vividly in the shade? You blink, he continues. The sun is for the body. The shade is for the mind. You expected small talk, yet metaphysical weather commentary. He launches into a discussion about virtue, illness, and the importance of walking barefoot on marble before noon. You nod occasionally, chewing another grape and trying not to sweat. The cypress above you sways. Birds chirp as if paid to provide ambience. Someone brings cheese, soft, fragrant, cut into triangles as if geometry. Mattered to digestion. You are. Given 2 slices and a napkin made of linen that feels smug, the patrician eats none of it. He merely rearranges the olives with a frown. You expected lunch? You get edible symbols of restraint. A younger man joins. Perhaps a student, perhaps a decorative relative. He reclines as well, slightly less convincingly. Asks whether dreams can be trained like dogs. Patrician says only if you don't. Fear them. You chew another grape to avoid being asked for input. The conversation drifts. Topics include the soul's proximity to the spleen, whether figs encourage moral. Clarity, a debate over which direction to face, while thinking the political implications of sneezing in public. You expected dialogue. You get a verbal obstacle course padded with citrus at one point. The patrician waves toward a servant, who brings a scroll and a very small knife. The scroll is read aloud. A treatise about serenity during fevers. The knife is used to cut. 1 olive in half. Precisely. No one eats it. It is left there as a witness. You expected entertainment. You get symbolic snack dissection. The breeze shifts. Someone adjusts your chair. Not out of kindness, but because it was slightly out of alignment with the sunbeam. You consider asking for water, but the silence is so delicate you fear it might shatter. So you sit. You breathe. You pretend your knees don't ache from sitting politely. Then, without transition, the patrician asks you, have you ever wept in a garden? You blink, he continues. It is the most dignified place to fail. You expected hospitality. You get therapeutic existential traps beneath ornamental foliage. The student asks what happens to the body after death. The patrician replies, it. Forgets. You wonder if your ankle has already started. Someone sneezes. Everyone freezes. The patrician nods slowly. Let it pass, he says. That was not an omen. You expected superstition. You get curated detachment, hand-woven in silk. At last, they dismiss you. Not with words, but with a slight collective sigh and the arrival of a servant carrying lemon water. For them, not for you, you rise, you bow. The patrician nods, as if you have passed a test. You're not sure what test it was. You're not sure you passed. You expected refreshment. You get metaphysical dehydration. As you step into the sunlight again, the air feels louder. The wind has forgotten how to behave. Cobblestones are less sympathetic now. What you carry? With you, the flavor of chilled grapes, the memory of a man who could weaponize a pause, and the soft weight of a towel that's finally begun to dry. You walk on, still hungry, but thinking. You're not supposed to be here. You wandered, perhaps by mistake, perhaps by intention disguised as confusion, and now you're standing in the back garden of the villa, where the conversation is looser, the shade is thicker, and no one trims the vines quite as obsessively. Cypress trees here are older, bent slightly like they've heard too many opinions. You expected order. You get leaves that haven't been lectured. 2 gardeners are working nearby. Neither notices you at first. One is sweeping with a broom made of bundled twigs and mild resentment. The other is pruning a shrub while humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like a recipe. They don't wear uniforms. They don't quote Plato. They wear tunics stained with olive oil and dignity. You expected servants? You get men who know the roots of things eventually. One of them, the older one, with knees that creak louder than his broom, glances over and nods at you. Fig? He asks, holding up a small basket. You accept it? The fig is warm, sweet, slightly bruised, but still better than anything philosophy has ever produced. You expected silence. You get fruit-based diplomacy. Where'd you come from? He asks. You answer vaguely. He says, as if that explains everything. It sits on a low stone bench and gestures for you to do the same. You do. The other gardener continues sweeping with rhythm, with purpose, as if the leaves are old debts being collected. You expected conversation, get leaf justice. They begin talking not to you exactly, but in your presence. A mix of gossip, herbal knowledge, and lightly disguised complaints about people with softer hands. You learn that the patrician drinks too much wine after dusk, that one of the household slaves believes in ghost moths, and that the cypress trees are getting ideas again. You expected secrets. You get domesticated mythology. See that? Bush, one gardener asks. You nod. Used to be taller. Then someone trimmed it wrong during a wedding. Cursed the marriage. 8. You glance at the bush. It looks innocent. It's probably how it gets you. You expected landscaping. You get horticultural revenge stories. The broom continues sweeping. Every few strokes, the younger gardener pauses to inspect a leaf, then flicks it away as if judging its choices. You can learn everything about a man from his garden. He says what he fears, what he hides, what he lets rot. You nod, slowly, as if you weren't just wondering how to ask for water. They don't offer you water. They offer insight. There's a weed that grows near the bathhouse, the older. One says, purple smells like vinegar, grows faster when the mistress argues with her brother. He shrugs. Plants know things. You pretend they don't. Makes it easier to keep sweeping. You expected botany. You get passive-aggressive plant gossip. A fig falls from the tree above you. No one moves to catch it. It hits the ground with a soft thud, rolls slightly, and stops by your foot. If it's meant for you, the older gardener says without looking, it'll be ripe. You pick it up. It is. Somehow you expected metaphor. You get fruit that obeys narrative rules. The sun shifts. A breeze passes. Someone sneezes in the distance, probably the patrician. The younger gardener mutters, "Not again." Then he says louder, he's been reading scrolls about diet and dreams again. That's when the sneezing starts. Expected disdain. You get occupational exasperation in botanical form. Eventually, the sweeping stops. The broom is leaned gently against a fig tree that appears to sigh. The gardeners rise, stretch, and nod toward you. Your quiet one says. You shrug. You've learned that's safer than an opinion? You think too much? the other says. That's fine. But think while sweeping or planting. That way you get something out of it. You expected instruction. You get philosophy with calluses. They return to work. The path is cleaner now, not spotless, just enough. Enough to show that someone noticed the leaves, cared about the space, but didn't fear the wind. You rise. You brush off your robe. There's dust on your knees and fig juice on your sleeve. You feel lighter, not enlightened. Just less heavy. You expected guidance. You got a fig and a reminder that leaves will always fall again. As you walk back toward the villa's main corridor, you glance over your shoulder. The older gardener is squatting by a stone basin, whispering to a sprig of rosemary. You do not ask what he's saying. Some questions are for the soil. You didn't know you were staying for dinner. No one told you. No one invited you. But someone pressed a folded tunic into your arms and said, "You'll want to change." You look at the tunic. Soft pale and smells faintly of rosewater. In class anxiety, the implication is clear. Your current garment wrinkled, road-worn, and still bearing traces of hospital towel scent, is not suitable for digesting lentils near elite people. You expected hospitality. You get wardrobe critique disguised as kindness. There's a small room off the courtyard. It's containing a mirror so polished it startles you. You try on the tunic. It fits. That's suspicious. Nothing in your life has fit on the first try. Suspect the fabric is made of pact with something. You expected cloth. You get wearable witchcraft. You step out, cleanish, uncertain. And immediately someone applies a dab of oil to your forehead. You flinch. They don't apologize. Evening scent, they say. You nod like that explains anything. You smell like citrus and submission. The dining room is wide, domed, lit by lamps that pretend they're stars. Low couches arranged in a crescent. Platters already set. Barley cakes, figs, cheese, olives. Something that might be pickled fish or aggressively seasoned regret. And oil. Bowls and bowls of olive oil, dark, golden, glistening, like it knows your secrets. You expected food. Get edible moral dilemmas. Everyone reclines, except you. You hover awkwardly, unsure of protocol. Someone pats the couch beside them. You settle, legs folded under you like a misplaced parcel. A servant pours wine. It is diluted, floral, and tastes like someone tried to turn a vineyard into a sermon. You expected refreshment. You get drinkable introspection. The patrician enters, robed in something loosely defined as leisurewear for men who've never missed a meal. He nods. Everyone else nods back, but slower, as though nodding too quickly might crack the veneer of decorum. He sits. He picks up a single olive and holds it between two fingers like a philosopher, considering a pebble. Then he says olive oil is the memory of light. No one blinks. You expected conversation. You get edible metaphors that threaten to multiply. Dinner. Bensa's servant offers you a dish. Small, circular, alarmingly symmetrical. You accept. It tastes of honey, cumin, and anxiety. Someone starts discussing balance not in the dish, but in life. We are what we digest, one man says, nodding sagely. And what we refuse to digest becomes our soul. You chew slower. You expected chewing. You get existential absorption. The olives are discussed at length. Their region, their upbringing, whether their bitterness reflects emotional honesty. One man claims he once solved a family feud through careful application of olive oil to bread. Another counters that he once seduced a senator's wife with only a fig and eye contact. You expected dinner conversation. You get mythological reenactments. With condiments, the patrician interrupts to recite a short poem about chickpeas. It's abstract. The final line is boiled but unbowed. Everyone nods. You stare at your plate and reconsider every life decision that brought you here. You expected digestion. You get identity formation through legumes. The servant refills your wine. You're not sure you drank any. Still, the cup remains full. This may be metaphorical. You're asked a question. What do you think pain is really? You pause. You answer honestly. Necessary. The table goes very still. Then the patrician claps softly. He's been at the hospital, someone. Whispers, You are now certified to speak. You expected invisibility. You get accidental authority. This earns you a new dish, lentils with vinegar and self-awareness. You eat. It tastes better than it sounds. A man leans over and asks whether you believe dreams are physical. You say yes, because you're chewing. He nods and says he once dreamed of being a tree for 3 consecutive nights and now refuses to wear bark-colored tunics. You expected theology. You get sleep-based fashion trauma. The conversation drifts toward illness. It's not just the body, but society. Someone blames architecture. Another says fevers are the soul's way of recalibrating. The patrician offers a theory involving music, blood pressure, and the moon's attitude. You say nothing. You dip bread into oil and pretend that's a statement. You expected rest. You get philosophical cardio with intermittent olives, finally. Dessert. A sweet paste of dates, almonds, and heavily implied meaning. Someone toasts to balance and the mercy of figs. The wine is refilled again. Your cup begins to look like it has no bottom. You begin to wonder whether this is a dinner, or a test, or both. The patrician stands. He thanks the cooks. He thanks the cypress trees. He does not thank the guests. That part is assumed. Yet you stand because everyone else does. A servant appears at your side and offers you a warm towel. You hesitate. It smells faintly of rosemary. An institutional memory. You expected closure. You get moist symbolism and a soft warning. You leave the room slowly, slightly full, slightly wiser, deeply uncertain. But you are wearing the tunic now, and that means something. The meal has ended. Officially, plates have been cleared. Hands wiped with scented cloths, and someone even whispered a blessing to the fig bowl. But no one moves. The room is heavy with the kind of silence that settles after digestion and before. Introspection, where the oil lamps flicker like they're nervous about what's coming next. You expected departure. You get a ritual pause stretched into eternity. You stay seated. Everyone stays seated. Reclining would be inappropriate now. Not because of etiquette, but because of the weight of olives consumed and ideas half swallowed. One man shifts slightly. A linen crease unfolds. Somewhere in the corner, a wine jug gurgles in its sleep. The patrician exhales through his nose. This means something. You expected conversation. You get mood breathing. Someone begins to speak. Soft voice. You don't catch the name, but you catch the tone. Reverent, resigned, wrapped in a kind of sadness that only educated people are allowed to feel publicly. He speaks of death, but gently, like he's describing someone else's laundry. You expected mourning. You get biography told through metaphor and light snack references. The soul, he says, does not flee. It walks, slowly, through the halls of memory. Everyone nods. Someone sighs. Someone else says, but what if the halls are flooded? The room holds its breath. You expected wine-induced poetry. You get theological water damage. You think of the hospital again, of towels, of knees, saints that didn't leave. And you wonder whether anyone here has ever seen someone die without metaphors. Just died. Just stopped. Just became still in the middle of a Tuesday. You expected distance. You get memory disguised as criticism. The lamps flicker. One goes out. A servant silently relights it. No one thanks him. Does not expect thanks. He has become part of the lamp's story now. A temporary chapter in the long life of a wick. You expected darkness. You get service with eternal undertones. Someone proposes a story. Not a joke, not an argument, just a quiet tale. About a fisherman who dreamt of catching a star, only to wake with a wet hand and an overwhelming sense of moral ambiguity. A table receives this story as though it were soup. No one slurps, everyone considers. You expected entertainment. You get bedtime parables for the ethically ambivalent. The patrician nods. He says nothing, but he reaches for a fig. Not to eat it, just to hold it, possibly for comfort. Possibly to prove he's still engaged. You briefly imagine grabbing the fig, biting it, and declaring no more symbolism. But you don't, because you're not sure it would work. You expected rebellion. You get soft compliance via fruit restraint. The hour grows late. You can feel it in your bones. It's a kind of late that smells like warm wax and secrets you forgot to tell someone. Yet no one leaves. No one even glances toward a door. To stand, first would be to admit fatigue or boredom, or worse, mortality. You expected bedtime. You get polite, existential chicken. Someone begins discussing the moon, not whether it's out, just the idea of it. It watches, one says. Not because it cares, but because it cannot blink. There is agreement. Someone murmurs like the past. No one questions the comparison. You expected astronomy. You get celestial passive aggression. The student from earlier leans over and whispers, "If I leave first, will that make me shallow?" You don't answer, but you both know it would. He sighs, the sigh of a man trapped in a conversation he helped prolong. You are now part of the standoff. You expected guests. You get hostages to politeness. The patrician finally speaks. The body is honest, he says. But the mind is a chronic liar with expensive taste. He pops the fig into his mouth. Silence. He chews with the kind of elegance reserved for retired philosophers and slightly suspicious goats. You expected insight. You get digestive wisdom with a garnish of smugness. Then slowly, painfully, someone stands. He bows slightly. Everyone tenses. Is this it? The end. The patrician nods once. The man exits. The room exhales, not in relief, but in reshuffling. You. Do not leave, not yet. Someone brings tea, not tea. Exactly warm water, with herbs and intention. You sip. It tastes like soil that forgave you. You expected flavor, yet forgiveness. Brewed lightly, another man rises to follow. Each one bows, not to the patrician, but to the room, as if apologizing for rejoining reality. You still sit. The tea warms your fingers. You're not sure you'll ever feel finished enough to stand. Eventually, the patrician rises. Everyone else must follow. The moment is fragile. It rolls. It stops beneath the couch like a metaphor with stage fright. He says, "Sleep well, if you can," and then he leaves. No one speaks for a full minute. You stand. Your legs are slow to respond. Your robe has creased itself into a topographical map of discomfort. You bow. No one sees. That's fine. You step out into the corridor. The lamps are lower here. The fig trees are asleep. You are unsure whether you dreamed that conversation, or if it dreamed you. You walk slowly. You expected conclusion. You get continuation disguised as quiet. They didn't tell you where to sleep. They didn't need to. After the last fig was consumed, after the last metaphor left the room, after the last olive pit was laid gently into a ceramic dish like a miniature funeral, you simply drifted. Not out the gate, not to the city, but to the garden again. You expected a room. You get a bench beneath a tree and the soft disapproval of nightbirds. The stone is cool. The cypress leans just enough to be polite. A servant saw you pass and placed a folded blanket beside you without a word. Not a thick one. It's not warm. Just enough to say yes, you still exist. You lie down. Your bones negotiate. Your knees write a letter of protest. Stay anyway. You expected comfort. You get philosophical austerity with tree cover. The night air smells of wet bark, old wine, and something else. Something like dried herbs and clean regrets. You breathe it in. You hold it for a moment. You wonder if this is what the patrician smells before he dreams of the moon judging him. You expected silence. You get a quiet, too old to be silent, somewhere nearby. Someone is sweeping. Still, again, always. The sound of twigs against stone, steady and meditative like the garden, is erasing its own footsteps. You find it oddly reassuring. Everything here is so well tended, it starts to feel slightly nervous. You expected sleep. You get a seminar on stillness conducted by leaves. You close your eyes. You try not to think. You fail. Your mind wanders. Revisits dinner. The half conversations. It's the olive oil eulogies. It's the cup that never emptied. The patrician's voice like old parchment trying to be gentle. You think of the gardener whispering to Rosemary. You think of Saint Samson folding linens no one would ever appreciate. You expected dreams. You get curated hallucinations in slow motion. A breeze passes. It tugs at your blanket like it's considering theft. The stars above the villa look expensive. You wonder who owns the stars here. Probably the same man who owns the metaphor about olive trees and personal growth. You. Turn over. The stone doesn't get softer, but you adapt. You feel your body beginning to blur into the bench, like sleep is trying to steal your edges. And yet, not yet. You open your eyes. The sky has shifted. It's not changed, just moved slightly. Like a servant adjusting the furniture of heaven. You expected rest. You get rearranged. There's a rustle in the trees. A fig falls. You hear it thud into the earth and stay there. It does not roll this time. It has accepted gravity and consequence. You relate, and then finally, the stillness deepens. It's not quiet, it's something else. The moment where you're too tired to hold on to yourself and too far gone to try, they let go. You sleep in the morning. The garden has already been swept. The fig is gone. The blanket has been folded. You wake with a stiffness. It's usually reserved for antique chairs. The sun is gentle, the cypress indifferent. You sit up, and for a brief moment, you're not sure if you dreamt the dinner, or if it dreamed you into being. You expected a new day. You get a continuation with improved lighting. You rise, walk back toward the main hall. No one greets you. But someone has left bread on the table. Small, round, suspiciously fresh. Beside it, oil still glistening, a gesture of departure or forgiveness. You eat slowly, thoughtfully, as if the bread will remember. You step into your shoes. They've been cleaned. You didn't ask for that. You suspect someone did it while you were dreaming about figs, or being one. You walk out of the villa. The gate doesn't creak. The cypress trees don't move. But you feel them watching, just a little, as if they are noting your exit, filing it away in their bark-bound archives. You expected farewell. Get a quiet checkbox in the universe's ledger. The road awaits. Cobbled, unapologetic, the kind. That gives you blisters not out of malice, but to remind you that you still have skin. You walk slowly. You carry nothing. And yet everything weighs just slightly more. You pass the spot where you first entered. It's the spot where the servant held the figs like a peace offering from horticulture. The stone is warm now. The air smells. Of effort you glance back. Just once. The villa is already forgetting you, but the cypress trees are not, and neither is the bench, and neither, strangely, are you. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. And now the lamps are low, the hall is still, and the garden has swept itself. Quiet once more. You've wandered through rooms that murmured philosophy, and corridors that smelled of vinegar, oil, and slow thoughts. You've held the needle, the towel, the fig, and somewhere in between, you were held to by stone, by memory, by the absurd patience of cypress trees. Thank you for staying until the end. If you're still awake, you're remarkable. If you're asleep, even better. Another story waits for you soon. Something equally gentle, equally strange, and now, as you lie there, you know the loop will wait once more for you.